Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees.
And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 267, The Showman, Part 3. At the end of Part 2, we find that John Patrick Daly has been released from Pentridge. The next we hear of him is at the end of April 1909, where he was in Tamworth, where 2,000 people attended the Australian Buckjumpers show on the Thursday and 1,500 on the Friday, and it notes that Professor Daly, a Queensland rider, rode in 3 seconds. He then makes his way down to Victoria, where on the 4th of March 1909, it says the best buck jumping show ever given in Sale is promised by Professor Daly and Miss Kemp Daly tomorrow night. And the advertisement for that says buck jumping. Professor Daly, the well-renowned horseman, is opening his wonderful show of buck jumping, colt taming and bullock riding on the vacant block near Ballarat Hotel. The numerous staff of riders are composed of celebrities such as Miss Kemp Daly, the greatest Australian horsewoman, and Jack Callaghan. Good seating and lighting. From the bush and the mountain and glen, they are routing the outlaws and men. If you don't mind a full boys, then come one and all boys. And on the 8th of March, in the Gippsland Times, Professor Daly opened his great buck jumping show at Sale on Friday night. There was a large attendance and a splendid show of buck jump riding and colt handling was given by Miss Kemp Daly, Jack Callaghan and Professor Daly. Miss Kemp Daly was riding a wild bullock when Callaghan sprang from the ground to his back and the pair rode him to a standstill. Miss Kemp Daly tonight will ride Mr. Bartlett's buck jumper, which has thrown a number of the best riders about Sale. Professor Daly states that several local riders will tonight try to earn the £1 per minute offered to those who can sit on the buck jumper quids. On the 22nd of March 1909 in the Gippsland Times, he's back in a spot of bother again. At the Sale Police Court on Saturday, John Patrick Daly and Jack Callaghan were charged with unlawfully assaulting Isa Singh and Ala Singh, respectively, on the 13th of March. They pled not guilty. At the suggestion of counsel, Mr. Harris consented to hear the cases together, as the same set of facts will be brought out on each. In opening the case, Mr. Wise, after outlining the facts, in which it was stated that one of the complainants had his jaw broken, stated there was no justification for the violence that had been shown. A man was entitled to act in self-defence, but he was only allowed to use means sufficient to defend himself, and anything the Indians had done would not warrant the defendant in breaking the old man's jaw. Dr. Hagenauer testified that Isa Singh visited him on Sunday the 14th, suffering from a fracture of the jaw on the left side. The injury might have been caused by a blow, but it would have taken a very severe blow. Isa Singh deposed that he was at the buck jumping show with 3 of his countrymen. They paid 2 shillings to go in, and after they'd been there about an hour, there was an interval. They went out, and when they went to return, Daly told them they must not go inside now. Witness asked for his money back if he could not go into the show, and then Daly knocked him down. He got up and Daly knocked him down again. He lost his senses then, and his mate took him away. The next morning he went to Dr. Hagenauer. He said he went to the Ballarat Hotel at the interval, but he did not remember speaking to any man. He did not speak to a woman, nor did he hear any of his countrymen do so. He did not see the defendants as he was returning to the show. He was in the hotel and had a shandy gaff and then went straight back to the show, followed by his 3 countrymen. He had a stick, but none of the others had, and he did not hit anybody with it. He did not hear a woman call out, "Let me go, you black swine, or I'll knock your head off with the whip." Ala Singh, Bata Singh and Yuala Singh corroborated the first witnesses' evidence. Ala Singh said he was in the hotel but did not see the defendants there. Bata Singh said he did not go into the hotel but waited outside, and Yuala Singh stood near him. It was near that hotel that Daly said he would not let any of the Indians go into the show again, but the witness did not know what he meant and did not hear Daly say one of them had spoken to his wife. Yuala Singh said he went into the hotel but assured the court he only drank lemonade. He did not see any women except those he saw in the circus. It was night time and he could not recognise Mrs. Daly when she was brought into the court. He was certain he did not take hold of any woman that night, and he did not hear a woman call out the words given above. He saw Daly and Callaghan drink 2 glasses of beer in the hotel, but neither spoke to him. He did not say to Callaghan, "I mean no harm." That closed the evidence for the prosecution. Then Mr. Rice said the defence in Daly's case was an absolute denial of any assault on any of the Indians, and he hoped to show that the Indians' version of the affair was altogether wrong. Daly was, unfortunately for himself, well known. It might be said that the Indians were strangers in a strange land and should be protected, but the same thing applied to this defendant. The evidence would show, as Daly came out of the hotel, he was attacked by one of the Indians with a stick and the others joined in. He took the sticks from 2 of them but did not strike them. Callaghan would say it was he who knocked some of them down, but he was also attacked with sticks first. Surely if ever a man was justified in using self-defence, it was when he was attacked with sticks, and the best sort of self-defence in such a case was a good straight punch, and that's what happened to a couple of the Indians that night. John Patrick Daly stated he was the proprietor of a buck-jumping show, which was in Sale on the 13th. There was an interval at 9:30, and he and Callaghan went to the Ballarat Hotel and had a drink. There were some Indians standing about there, and he recognised Yuala Singh. Mrs. Daly was following him, and he was about to go into the hotel when he heard his wife call out excitedly, "Let me go, you black swine, or I'll knock your head off with the whip." He rushed back and saw Yuala Khan had hold part of her clothing. He then went into the hotel, and when he came out, the Indians were in a group on the footpath, and one of them said, "What for you call India men bad names?" I told them that I did not want anything to do with them, and as I turned to go away, one of them, the tall one, hit me across the head and arms with a stick. While this was going on, 2 arms shot over my shoulder and down went 2 Indians. I did not strike anyone that night. I took 2 sticks away from the Indians. After the row, there were some Indians hanging about. I instructed my sister not to allow any of them in again. I had cause to be angry, but I controlled myself and spoke calmly after my wife asked not to make a row with the Indian who had insulted her. The Indians got excited because I called one of them Hindu. When I took the sticks from them, the row ceased because they had no sticks to fight with. I saw Callaghan trying to guard his head from sticks. Jack Callaghan, Rough Rider, in the employ of Daly, deposed that he saw one Indian on the street. The Indian who was there when he went into the hotel with Daly was Yuala Singh. The Indian said, "Me mean no harm, me no mean to insult your wife, me say hello everybody." Witness said, "Well, if that is all right." There were some Indians between the bar door and the right-of-way, and they had sticks. They attacked Daly with sticks. The man with his jaw tied up hit at the witness with a stick and called him a bastard. The other man also hit at me, and I hit him and threw off his hit. I did not see Daly strike an Indian. The row lasted 3 or 4 minutes, and it happened under the veranda. Daly got hit first, and I said, "Look out, Jack, they're going to get you." I knocked 2 of them down whilst Daly was trying to get the sticks. When I said, "Come on, Jack," this old man, Isa Singh, said, "Yes, come on, Jack, we'll give you Jack." Mrs. Mary Daly deposed at the interval I went out, carrying a stock whip. An Indian, Yuala Singh, caught, and Mr. Wise objected at this point and said, "If this man insulted her, it has nothing to do with the assault on the others." After argument, Mr. Harris allowed the evidence to test the credibility of the witness. The witness said Yuala Singh caught hold of her arm. She said he had plenty of money and made a most insulting proposal to her, and she said, "You black swine, if you speak to me, I will hit you over the head with this stick." The witness saw all of the row. 2 or 3 of the Indians had sticks. They were striking her husband and Callaghan. She saw one of the Indians fall, and after the row she went back to the tent. Alexander Wynd, a bricklayer, saw 5 Indians in front of the Ballarat Hotel up against the wall. 3 or 4 had short sticks. He saw Callaghan and Daly come out from the door, and he heard Daly forbidding them to come to the tent as they had been making a disturbance. He saw an Indian strike at Callaghan with a stick, and one of the Indians was knocked down by Callaghan. Leslie Hall, a boy employed at the Ballarat Hotel, said he saw the Indians at the front door with sticks. One held a stick up to strike Daly, but the witness did not see him strike. He did not see Daly hit anyone. "Did you tell Constable Flanagan that you saw Daly hit the Indian twice and knock him down?" The witness said yes. He said, "Is that true?" And he said yes. "Then it was not true when you said that you did not see Daly strike anyone?" He said no. The blows struck by Daly knocked the Indian down. William Meldrum, a contractor, was at the circus on Saturday night, and he was there during the interval. He saw 4 Indians under the veranda and saw one Indian put out his arm to catch hold of Daly's wife, and I heard her call him a black swine. The Indians stopped at the corner of the building on the right-of-way. They were angry and talking in their own language. I met Callaghan going in and said to him, I would not go out there if I were you. The Indians look threatening. I heard Daly say to the Indians he would not have any of those dirty rascals insult his wife. This closed the case, and the PM said the main fact shown was there had been an assault, but under provocation. The boys' evidence was very conclusive as to the striking. The assault had been proven in both cases. Mr. Harris said the assault was of a severe nature. There may have been great provocation, but proprietors of public entertainment should learn to keep their tempers. The police were always at hand to assist them. Daly had broken the man's jaw. He would be fined £5 or 1 month, and Callaghan fined £3 or 14 days, with £1, 12 shillings, 6 costs in each case. He would grant a stay of execution for 14 days to give the defendants time to pay. On the 6th of April 1909, they're now down in Warrigal. A hospital benefit, a great display of riding of buckjumpers, unbroken colts, bulls and bullocks by the world's champion combination, Kemp, Daly's and Callaghan. Professor Daly and his marvellous feats of colt handling, the man who makes wild horses sing to him. Jack Callaghan has proven himself the absolute boss of buck rider of the world. Miss Kemp Daly, the greatest lady rider in existence, who rides notorious outlaws in a light saddle and wild bulls and bullocks with a surcingle. A monster program, don't miss it. Mothers, bring your children to see this great, humane horsemaster. Then on the 29th of January 1910, they're down in Wood End. There's a double attraction at the Wood End Racecourse next Wednesday, when in addition to the program of races, there's a monster display of horsemanship given by Professor and Miss Kemp Daly, whose skill of many of our readers have no doubt heard of. They and their assistants have been given nightly exhibitions in Gisborne lately, and the Gazette speaks very highly of them indeed. The Professor attended the Kitchener camp last week at the request of some of the principal officers, and the Seymour Telegraph, speaking of his exhibition, describes him as a wonderful horseman who can almost revolutionise horsebreaking by humane and simple methods. On the 5th of March 1910, the Sunbury News reports, on Thursday night, Professor Kemp Daly, the well-known horse trainer, gave an exhibition of his wonderful manner of mastering and handling unbroken horses in a specially erected arena at the Rupert's Wood Hotel in Sunbury. The professor had received a pair of fine chestnut fillies, one 5 years and the other 6 years old, from Mr. Cumming at Rupert's Wood to try his hand on. These horses had never been handled in any shape or form, with the exception of being caught to brand them. Within a short time, the professor had caught, handled, put saddle and bridle on and ridden one of the two, and not only ridden it, but stood up on its back and ended up sliding off its back over its tail without the animal making the slightest attempt to use its heels. The professor humorously remarked that it was the best end to get off a doubtful horse, as he could not see what you were doing. The second horse was just as successfully treated, and the use of Professor Kemp Daly's patent tackle for throwing horses humanely was also illustrated on the animals. Mrs. Kemp Daly gave a skillful exhibition with the stock whip and ropes, and her manipulation of these evoked well-merited applause. Paul the bucking bull was introduced to the audience. Two of the professor's understudies mounted Paul and managed to sit on him for a while, but were glad to return to terra firma, one in not too graceful an attitude. But Paul, with the end of his horns, reminded him of the necessity of leaving the ring hurriedly. The professor also rode the bull and a buck-jumper successfully. Unstinted applause greeted the professor's good work. The performance will be repeated this afternoon at 3 o'clock. On Tuesday, the professor opens at Melton and at Bacchus Marsh on Friday. At Upper Madison on Saturday last, Lady Gibson Carmichael visited the professor's hippodrome and was much interested in his performance. And again in the Sunbury News on the 19th of March 1910, so they're still in the area, Professor Kemp Daly will show on the racecourse next Wednesday, where he'll give a display of colt handling. Miss Kemp Daly will give an exhibition in the use of whips and ropes, and the performance will conclude with the bucking competition on the bucking bull Paul. In order to show the effectiveness of his methods, one of the Rupert's Wood fillies will be put in the ring. On the 30th of April 1910 in the Wood End Star, Superintendent Kelsall continued an inquiry on Wednesday and Thursday when he commenced at Madison last week in reference to a complaint made against Constable Tucker of failing to make an arrest for an alleged assault that took place on the 14th of March. It appears that on that date, Professor Kemp Daly was at a hotel at Macedon when a difference arose between him and a youth named J. Sutton of Wood End, who was in the billiard room of the hotel. Sutton made a hurried departure and was followed by Kemp Daly into the street. Mr. Morris and Keating came into the affair, and the allegation was that the constable failed to arrest Kemp Daly. Doesn't seem like there's much that has eventuated from that, as on the 9th of May 1910 in the Ballarat Star, they are advertising buck jumping. The renowned horseman, Professor Kemp Daly, colt handling, buck jumping and bullock riding in the Militia Reserve at the back of the exhibition building, the most entertaining show of its kind in the world, stout fences to protect the audience with good seating and lights. Then a little over a month later, they're back up in Queensland. On the 15th of June 1910 in the Mackay Daily Mercury, it says Professor Kemp, the well-known horseman and rough rider, who's also well-known locally, is at present in Mackay, and by notice elsewhere it will be seen that he purposes holding a monster buck-jumping contest in conjunction with West Circus. Professor Kemp is up to all the finer points in connection with buck jumping, and patrons can rely on a first-class program being submitted. For the contest, liberal prizes are to be given away, and those attending can rely on witnessing some clever riding. Professor Kemp has command of some of the biggest contests held in the Commonwealth, and his reputation in the business is front rank. Besides 20 head of outlaws, there are bucking bullocks and mules. This, added to the ordinary program, should provide ample amusement and instruction for the large number that will doubtless be in attendance. And in the Benalla Northeastern Ensign on the 6th of January 1911, it records that in Rockhampton, Queensland, there was a rough riding match between Professor Kemp, Jack Daly, well known in Benalla, and Professor Bates, an American stockman. The match was for £20 a side, each man to catch, saddle up and ride 3 horses. After a good display, Bates was declared the winner. Kemp admitted that he was fairly beaten under the conditions, but said he'd like to meet Bates again. Bates is 5'10" and weighs 13 stone and has a great reputation in America, New Zealand and Australia, while Kemp's height is 6 foot and he weighs 12 stone 2 pounds and is only known in Australia. And in Rockhampton on the 9th of January 1911, the average Australian dearly loves to see a good buck jumping show, and Professor Kemp's show, now located in Denham Street, is nightly drawing very large crowds. The Professor has some splendid buck jumpers, and in the bucking bull bill he has an animal that defies a human being to sit on its back. The Professor announces nightly that £5 will be given to the rider who manages to stick on for 5 minutes, an amount that should easily draw some of our best riders to show off their skills. Professor Kemp on Friday night rode a new buck jumper in Curly Kate for the first time in public. She's a vicious brute, and though her bucking and twisting was very good, she could not unseat her rider, who was warmly applauded for his daring and cleverness. Miss Kemp also gave a clever exhibition of stock whip cracking. On the 18th of January 1911, in the Rockhampton Morning Bulletin, it reported that John Patrick Daly, a horsebreaker, was charged with having created a disturbance on Sunday night at the Royal Hotel and unlawfully assaulted Constable William Thomas Smith and unlawfully resisted the police. He pled guilty. He was convicted but not punished. And then on the 24th of February 1911, it reports from Mount Morgan. John P. Daly, alias Professor Kemp, was charged with unlawfully using a black mare, the property of Briggs and Company. William Warfield, the constable stationed at Mount Morgan, stated that on the 21st he received a warrant. After he received it, he went in search of the defendant. At 3:40 p.m, he saw him in the police office and read the warrant to him. The defendant replied, "The fact of the matter is that the horse doesn't belong to me at all, it belongs to my missus." Witness told him that he arrested him for unlawfully using a dark brown mare that was branded near the shoulder, the property of Briggs and Company. After he arrested him, and while they were still at the police station, the defendant said the horse was at the Golden Spur Hotel, locked up in the yard. The defendant said he would give the witness an order to get the horse. He then took the defendant to the watch house and he was locked up. The witness went to the Golden Spur Hotel and saw the proprietor, Mr. Clues. He showed the proprietor the order he got from the defendant. After Clues read the order, he took the witness to the yard at the back of the hotel. He saw a dark brown mare there. He unlocked the gate and took possession of the mare and produced her to the court. He did not remember the defendant saying anything to him about his transactions with Mr. Briggs in respect to the mare. Charles Briggs, auctioneer, stated that he knew the defendant now before the court. On the 14th, the defendant came to him and asked him if he would advance him money on a horse or horses, as he must raise £4 by 12 o'clock. The witness replied that he did not do business of that sort, particularly on horses. The defendant then said he had a mare and he was expecting a man from Horse Creek to come and purchase her for £10, and if the purchaser turned up, perhaps he could sell it to him for £10, and then if he made a good profit, perhaps the witness might give the defendant something more than he bought the horse for. The witness said, "Very well, you bring the horse along, let me have a look at it and put it in the yard and we'll consider the matter." During the morning, the defendant brought the witness the mare now before the court. The defendant brought it to the front of the office and the witness asked the defendant to take it around the yard at the back, and from the back veranda he saw him deliver it to the witness's son. They looked at the brands and then came into the office, and the defendant said to him, "You might give me £5, I have to get £4, but would like some loose cash." Witness replied, "That is as much as I think the animal is worth." He passed the transaction to his son, who fixed up the receipt. He agreed to give the defendant £5 and said to him, "I thoroughly understand, Kemp, that this is a sale of that horse." And the defendant said, "Oh yes, I know that. You are a gentleman, and I hope that if you do well out of it, you will give me something out of it." He saw the defendant leave the office and go away. The mare was then in his yard in his possession and remained there. On the morning of the 16th, the defendant came to his office with a man who he said was likely to purchase the horse. He asked permission to go through the office to the yard to show the horse. The witness said to the defendant, "I've got an offer of £8 for the horse, and if you don't trot along somebody who is going to give me more, I'm going to sell it at once." The defendant said, "Don't do that, it's worth £10 or £11. They inspected the horse and went away. Within an hour or two, the defendant returned with some other man and said to him that the other man would buy the horse provided it gives a satisfactory trial in the cart. "Can we take it for a trial?" The witness said, "Yes, if he wants the horse, bring it back and we can fix up the sale. If he doesn't want it, bring the horse back." He did not see anything more of the defendant or the horse until yesterday morning, when the defendant rode up to his office on the mare, now before the court. He went out on the curb and said to the defendant, "This is my horse. Take your saddle off and get down. I want possession of it." The defendant said, "No, you don't." Witness's son was standing on the curb and he made a grasp at the bridle, which was on the mare, and the defendant said, "You blip, I'll do it for you." He went up on the other side of the defendant and said, "You keep off." Witness told his son to go for a constable, and he jumped on his pony and rode away. The defendant backed away from him up the street and called out, "If you say you have a receipt for the horse, it's a forgery." Defendant then rode away on the witness's horse. The defendant had no authority from him to make use of the horse except by the words already mentioned. The only person who had authority to give permission to use the mare was his son John. As the defendant rode away on the morning of the 16th, he said, "And I'll put the mare away too," and that was the last I saw of the defendant or the mare until this morning. After the defendant rode away, he laid the complaint. He did not hear the defendant say, "I'll put the mare away safely and come back and meet you with the police." He was not quite sure what he said to him as he was getting away. The first arrangement was for him to give the defendant £4 if he approved of the horse. Subsequently, the arrangement was altered to £5. The defendant got possession of the mare in question lawfully and with the witness's consent when he took it out of his yard, but only for the purpose of a trial. It was a straight-out sale, and the defendant only got possession of her on the understanding that he said he made no claim of right to the horse since. The defendant carried on a buck-jumping show, and a horse that would buck-jump would have been more value to him than the one that was played out. The witness was now the owner of the mare. It was his property. The receipt was in the name of Briggs & Company. He was the registered firm of Briggs & Company. He did not say to the defendant something to the effect that if he brought along a buyer for £10, that he would give him back £4 10 shillings from the sale. He did not say that he wanted 10 shillings for the loan, nor did he say something to the effect that if he came to buy the horse back again himself, he would take £5 10 shillings for it. He said something to the effect that he would want 10 shillings on his bargain. John Williamsbrigg, the son, also added that when there was the altercation in the street, that Daly said, "Look out, you blob, I'll smash your head." Nothing was said to the witness by the defendant to the effect that he would be responsible if the mare crippled herself. The defendant was remanded until the 23rd. Bail allowed the defendant in his own recognisance in the sum of £10. On the 2nd of May 1911, there at Maryborough in Queensland, W. Tullipin and Professor Kemp's buck-jumping show, now travelling through Maryborough, opened to a packed house last night when the buck-jumpers threw most of the local riders. This will probably be the last appearance here. Then on the 19th of August 1911, they're in Ipswich. On Martu's ground in Limestone Street last night, Professor Kemp opened a short season. Evidently a man whose early life has been spent in the solitudes of great expanses of the west and northwest, giving over to raising of stock, he has brought with him to Ipswich means for displaying for the edification of all who cares to patronise him the skill and the arts of the bushman. With his show, too, he has brought a most accomplished horsewoman, Miss Kemp, who's proven her skill in the saddle to thousands at the Brisbane exhibition a week ago. Last night Miss Kemp gave a very clever exhibition with stock whips and a lasso. The whips she handled with remarkable cleverness. First she gave a wide variety of volleys, and then with great accuracy she chopped bits of rolls of paper held by the professor and flicked a cigarette from his lips while standing some yards away. With the lasso she was equally dexterous. Roping the professor from the opposite side of the ring, she bound him hand and foot with half-hitches thrown from the same spot. She also gave a very interesting turn with her trained horse, which she claims is a Brumby from the scrubs of North Queensland. The professor himself rode a rather rough bullock and exerted his powers over a mare and 2 foals to such an extent that the trio left the enclosure much quieter than when they entered it, and with the professor mounted on one of the foals and a little boy on the other. Then on the 18th of November 1911, they're up at Killarney. Professor Kemp of buck-jumping fame had a lively time at Killarney on the Downs the other night. He refused to give the band that he engaged to play free admission to the show, and then the fun began. Kemp seized one of the band instruments and the crowd seized Kemp. They dragged him through a barbed wire fence, and the fence dragged his shirt and pants into strips. Kemp's sister took a hand, but Kemp fled for shelter, and when last seen was armed with a revolver and a stirrup iron. Kemp, or Daly, or whatever his real name is, should have very nearly had enough of law courts by this, but is due to face the barrier again over his antics at Killarney. A week later, they're advertising the casino in Kyogle Courier and North Coast Advertiser. Kemp Daly's Royal Shaft buck jumping, colt breaking and bullock riding by the renowned horsemaster Professor Kemp, ably assisted by the truly marvellous horsewoman Miss Katie Kemp, the Australian bush girl, and a team of daring horsemen. Chester, the horse with human brains, defies the ablest mathematician to puzzle with his mental calculations, must be seen to be believed. This combination is acknowledged by experts to be the most powerful of its kind existing, being highly instructive as well as entertaining. Parents should bring their children so that they learn from the able horsemaster how to treat our noble friend the horse in a manner worthy of Australians. A booklet on horse mastery is on sale for 1 shilling. Popular prices, good seating and lighting. A stout fence to protect the audience. Then on the 2nd of December 1911, in the Brisbane Saturday Observer, from Casino, it says that the police court yesterday, Professor Kemp, the buck-jumping showman, was proceeded against by Sergeant Ether on a charge of ill-treating a bullock. The police evidence was that Kemp rode the bullock in a tent on Saturday night, digging his spurs into its flanks and shoulder, with the dog repeatedly biting the animal's heels. The defendant swore that the spurs that he produced were not severe and were only used as a pretence, and the dog did not bite the animal, although it appeared to do so. The local stock inspector was called and stated that he examined the bullock on the previous day. It fed out of the defendant's hand, was very quiet and showed no signs of injury, with the exception of slight bites on the heels, from which it would not suffer much pain. The bench imposed a fine of 10 pence with 6 pence costs. The defendant gave notice of appeal, which has since been lodged. And then on the 9th of December 1911 in the Bowen Independent, it outlines the incident at Killarney in a lot more detail. For those who know Professor Kemp, the following clip from a Southern Exchange will be interesting and amusing. Professors Baldwin and Kemp were billed to contest, on certain conditions, displays of horsemanship. The stipulation is given to the public, being a £25 a side and certain percentages of the door takings. It must be remarked that on the previous evening, a number of persons paid for admission to see Baldwin's show at work, but owing to a storm and winds, the proceedings were short, and patrons were given to understand their tickets would hold good for the next night. But alas, Professor Kemp had not been consulted, and he mounted a 15-inch gatepost and laid it out hot and heavy on Scunthorpe and the press, sounding his own and Baldwin's praises till further orders, at the same time adding there would be no free tickets. The local band had been engaged to play, but had luckily, it would appear, been paid beforehand for its services. The custom is always for the band to receive 10 shillings and 6 pence and free admission for playing to any entertainment. The latter consideration was denied them, and the public outside became incensed and declined to support the show. Boys soon climbed the adjacent shops and buildings to view the proceedings, and Kemp, professor of many things it would appear, ordered them down with threats of violence. The boys heeded not, being armed with various kinds of weapons. Miss Kemp came on the scene a little later with a store of stones, and she let fly with all the precision of a pushite. The scene of ducking heads was most amusing, and the stones and pieces of coal flew back to her until she decamped, as did those on the roof. Kemp could be heard inside the arena giving vent to some of his feelings, causing those who did not patronise the show low-down mongrels and other choice names. This incensed a good many, and retort after retort went to and fro on the night winds, the result being that Kemp and his sister came towards the fence, the former using his pet word mongrel a dozen times. Miss Kemp came forward to a fence and seized a euphonium belonging to the band, which was standing outside. She dragged it through the barbed wire, when some bandsmen noticed the action and went to regain possession of the instrument. Miss Kemp took possession and rushed off behind the tenting. Mr. T. Williams, the owner of the instrument, be it said, had so far taken no hand or part in the proceedings, and he made a courteous demand for the return of his instrument, but was denied in a most savage and threatening manner by both Kemp and his sister. Kemp returned to the fence amid the din and uproar from 50 to 60 persons outside, and receiving a reply to his remark that they were a dirty low lot of mongrels, he spotted one individual close handy and made a hit over the barbed wire, but he hit the wind and received barbs on his chest. Maddened, he went onto the street through the gateway and challenged anyone to fight, and again received a reply which caused him to rush one young fellow. This was a signal for a commotion, and the crowd inside the tent swelled those outside. Kemp followed his man, dealing out blows. The crowd followed, Kemp dealing out stoush. Miss Kemp rushed out, and Kemp rushed in, and in attempting to get through the barbed wire fence got caught. The crowd dealt it to him and tore him off the fence, but not before his shirt was off his back and a great piece taken out of the rear of his trousers. Miss Kemp was out in the road behind the sanitary van. What a scene! It was a riot. There she stood aground, in encounter with others when Kemp came up, but the woman and Kemp had enough of the highways. They were allowed to go back to the grounds unmolested, but amid a roar of hooting. Mr. Williams again pleaded with Kemp at the tent door for the return of the instrument. Kemp refused and landed a cowardly blow on Williams's face. Matters quietened somewhat on Kemp's disappearance for a time, but later he returned with the instrument, it is alleged, minus a valve, and crushed it to such an extent for it to be useless. It's alleged that the instrument was flown among the horse's feet. The sergeant was sought, but he was out of town. Kemp again returned, and amid more hoots came forth and stated that Miss Kemp was provided with a revolver and would shoot anyone down like a dog who attempted to interfere with her. As to the contest inside, they decided on the grounds on Wednesday. When Wednesday came, the calico was down. What is to the outcome, if at all, is not known yet, but it is said action will be taken by the owner of the instrument for damages. A word of praise is due, however, to Professor Baldwin and his men. They acted honourably throughout and were cheered by the crowd. Kemp received catcalls and boohoos. In part 4, I'll be covering the rest of the showman's career and whether he's able to keep out of trouble from now on.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.